It started with a text message, innocuous on the surface. "Hey, Alex, I think we should take a pause and reassess things." The words stared back at me from my phone screen, cold and detached. It was from Rachel, my wife of 6 years. My first instinct was confusion. She had never been the dramatic type. No screaming matches, no passive-aggressive silence. We were, or so I thought, the definition of a stable couple. Sure, we weren't perfect, but who is? When I called her to ask what she meant by pause, her voice was calm, almost eerily so. "Just some space, Alex," she explained. "I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I need time to figure things out." I didn't argue. Instead, I offered support, even though her words gnawed at my gut. Maybe it was work stress. Rachel worked in marketing for a luxury lifestyle brand, a demanding job that often kept her late at the office. We were both in our mid-30s, careers humming along, childless by choice, living in the kind of suburban house that graced magazine spreads. If she needed a breather, I figured I could give her that. But then came the crack. The next day, my mother of all people called me. She didn't mince words. "Alex, you need to look at Rachel's social media." "What? Why?" My stomach tightened. "Just look." I hadn't thought to check her accounts. Rachel and I weren't the kind of couple who scrutinized each other's posts. Trust was supposed to be implicit. But when I opened Instagram, her posts didn't appear. I wasn't blocked. She was simply hiding her updates from me. And that didn't stop my mom. She sent me screenshots and my world flipped. Rachel was in Cabo San Lucas, a beachside paradise we'd once talked about visiting together, but she wasn't alone. The man in the photos with her wasn't just any random guy, it was Ethan, her ex-boyfriend, the one she dated just before me. His arm rested casually around her shoulders in one picture, and in another, they were toasting cocktails by the ocean. The captions were vague, but infuriatingly smug. Sometimes you need to revisit the past to find clarity. My pulse pounded in my ears. I didn't call her, didn't text her, didn't even acknowledge what I'd seen. What was the point? The evidence was staring me in the face. Instead, I shut myself in my office and sat in silence. I felt anger, humiliation, and the dull ache of betrayal. Rachel returned home a week later, suitcase in hand, wearing a breezy sundress that screamed vacation. She smiled as if nothing had happened. "Hi, Alex," she greeted me, breezing past to drop her bags by the stairs. "I feel so much better." That break was just what I needed. I didn't respond immediately, just stood there, watching her unpack souvenirs she'd probably bought with him. Eventually, I spoke. "I know where you went. I know who you were with." Her reaction wasn't shock, it was annoyance. She sighed, running a hand through her sun-bleached hair. "I told you I needed space," she said. "You assumed it meant something else." "That's not my fault. You went on vacation with your ex, Rachel. It's not like I cheated." Her tone was sharp now. "A pause means the rules are different. We weren't technically together." The mental gymnastics she performed to justify her actions were mind-boggling. I didn't argue. Instead, I calmly said, "We're done. This marriage is over." For the first time, her mask slipped. "What?" "Alex, don't be ridiculous. It was just a trip. You're blowing this out of proportion." I didn't stay to hear the rest. I left the room, and by the next morning, I was sitting with my lawyer drafting divorce papers. That should have been the end of it. Rachel's audacity didn't stop at her betrayal. When served with the papers, she tried to paint me as controlling, emotionally distant, and unreasonable. She even had the gall to demand alimony, claiming her career had suffered because she prioritized supporting me. It was a blatant lie, and it fueled my resolve. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. I decided mine would be served strategically, with precision and patience. It wouldn't just be Rachel facing the consequences. Ethan would have his reckoning, too. I wasn't interested in petty games or shallow vengeance. If I was going to respond, it had to count. Rachel and Ethan thought they'd swept their actions under the rug, but they underestimated me. Rachel, with her arrogance, never imagined I would dig deeper into her life, and Ethan, well, he had skeletons in his closet that were practically begging to be unearthed. The first step was quiet observation. People tend to expose themselves if you give them enough rope. Rachel was still working at her luxury marketing firm, where her social media presence was crucial to her professional brand. She had cultivated an image of an accomplished, ethical, and aspirational professional. Ethan, meanwhile, was a self-proclaimed entrepreneur, dabbling in consulting gigs that were as vague as his morals. I started with Ethan. A couple of discreet background checks revealed a fascinating trail of lawsuits and financial troubles. He had defrauded a few former clients, stiffed contractors on payments, and most recently, been involved in a questionable business venture that had gone belly up. There was a pattern, and it screamed instability. Then came Rachel. I didn't stop at her professional life. I analyzed everything: her work habits, her contacts, even her digital footprint. It wasn't difficult to piece together the story she wanted to keep hidden. She had been funneling some of our shared savings into personal luxuries, things that had mysteriously gone missing from our joint budget. Worse yet, she had been using her company's resources for personal favors, a direct violation of her contract. I didn't confront her. Instead, I built a case. One evening, a week before the divorce was finalized, Rachel came over to pick up some of her belongings. Her attitude was as grating as ever. "You'll regret this," she said, casually sipping the coffee I hadn't even offered her. "You think you're punishing me, but you're just being petty." "Sure," I replied, keeping my expression neutral. She leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, as though she was in control of the situation. "By the way, my lawyer says I'm entitled to half of the house in alimony, so I hope you're ready to negotiate." I nodded, giving her nothing. Inside, I was playing out my plan. The divorce settlement was the final piece of the puzzle. She thought she was walking away with a payday, and Ethan probably expected a piece of it. But I had already set the wheels in motion to dismantle their little dream. The first blow came the next day. Ethan's questionable business practices caught up to him when a former contractor filed a lawsuit against him for unpaid wages. How did the contractor suddenly find the resources to pursue legal action? Let's just say an anonymous donor covered the legal fees. Ethan's finances, already shaky, started to crumble. Next, I turned my attention to Rachel's career. Through a trusted friend in corporate compliance, I anonymously tipped off her employer about her misuse of company resources. The firm launched an internal investigation, uncovering enough evidence to terminate her contract. It wasn't immediate, but within weeks, Rachel was out of a job. Rachel called me after her firing, her tone a mix of outrage and panic. "Do you know what happened? My company is accusing me of misconduct. They said they have evidence, but it's all a mistake." "Sounds rough," I said evenly, "but I'm sure you'll figure it out." "You don't understand, Alex. This could ruin me. If this goes on my record, I'll never work in the industry again." "I'm sure you'll find a way," I said, my voice calm and detached. Her frustration boiled over. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? You think this is funny?" "Rachel," I said, my tone razor-sharp now, "I warned you. Actions have consequences. You just didn't listen. That was the last time we spoke directly. The final piece of my plan was the house." Rachel had demanded half, but she didn't realize I had already leveraged her financial misconduct in siphoning from our savings as evidence during the divorce proceedings. My lawyer was brilliant, highlighting how her actions had devalued the marital assets. The judge awarded her nothing, not a dime, not a piece of property, not even the alimony she'd hoped for. As the ink dried on the divorce papers, Rachel's perfect life was in tatters. Ethan was drowning in lawsuits, Rachel's professional reputation was irreparably damaged, and I had walked away unscathed, free to rebuild my life without the weight of betrayal. The beauty of it all was how little effort it took on my part. They had built their house of cards. All I did was give it a gentle nudge. After the divorce was finalized, I expected Rachel and Ethan to disappear from my life. But people like them never go quietly. A week later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Ethan, his voice dripping with misplaced bravado. "Alex, let's cut the crap." "I know what you've been doing," he said. "You think you can just ruin people's lives and walk away? You don't scare me." I almost laughed at the audacity. "Ethan, if I wanted to ruin your life, you wouldn't even be on the phone with me right now." There was a pause. I could hear the anger boiling beneath his faux confidence. "You've made a big mistake." "Did I?" I said, my voice calm. "Let's make something clear. You and Rachel did this to yourselves. You thought you could lie, manipulate, and cheat without consequence. But you underestimated me." He hung up, but his call only solidified one thing. I wasn't done yet. Ethan and Rachel were still clinging to their delusions of power, and that needed to change. The next phase of my plan was subtle, but effective: social exposure. I knew that Rachel and Ethan thrived on public perception. Rachel had always been obsessed with appearances: dinner parties, Instagram-worthy vacations, designer clothes. Ethan wasn't much different, constantly networking with people who could elevate his status. Destroying their public image was the next logical step. I started with Rachel. Her former co-workers were already whispering about her termination. But I gave them a little push. I reached out anonymously to one of her colleagues, someone I knew was always hungry for gossip. With a few carefully worded emails, I provided enough details to make Rachel's misconduct a hot topic in her professional circle. It wasn't long before word spread that she had been let go under a cloud of suspicion. Then came Ethan. His ongoing lawsuit was already damaging his credibility. But I added fuel to the fire. I compiled a detailed dossier of his financial misdeeds and sent it anonymously to a journalist who specialized in exposing fraudsters. The article that followed was a masterpiece, laying bare Ethan's history of shady business practices. It was shared widely, and within days his reputation in the entrepreneurial community was in shreds. What I hadn't anticipated was the ripple effect. Rachel and Ethan had been flaunting their relationship on social media, and people quickly connected the dots. Comments on their posts turned sour, and the narrative shifted. They weren't a power couple, they were opportunists who had burned bridges and betrayed people to climb the social ladder. The backlash was relentless. One evening, I found myself scrolling through the chaos on their profiles. Rachel had turned off comments on her posts, while Ethan had gone completely silent. A small part of me felt pity for them, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of justice. They had chosen this path. I had simply revealed the truth, but the most satisfying moment came when I least expected it. I was at a local cafe enjoying a rare, quiet afternoon when I overheard a conversation at the next table. Two women were discussing Rachel. "Did you hear about what happened to her?" One of them said she got fired, lost her house, and now she's living with that guy. "What's his name?" "Ethan?" "Yeah," the other replied. "But I heard he's in trouble too. Something about lawsuits and bankruptcy." They laughed, and for the first time in months I felt a genuine sense of closure. The world had seen them for who they truly were, and I didn't have to lift another finger. Despite everything, I didn't let revenge consume me. It was a chapter in my life, not the whole story. I poured my energy into rebuilding. I focused on my career, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again. One of those dates turned into something more. Her name was Clara, a graphic designer with a sharp wit and an infectious laugh. Unlike Rachel, she didn't care about appearances or social status. She cared about honesty and connection, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. When Rachel's name came up occasionally in conversation, Clara would roll her eyes. "Sounds like you dodged a bullet," she said once, and I couldn't help but agree. Months turned into a year, and my life was unrecognizable compared to the wreckage Rachel and Ethan had left behind. Clara and I were steady and happy, and my career had taken off in ways I hadn't expected. I'd moved into a new house, modern, open, and entirely mine. The ghost of my past was a distant shadow, but then, as life often does, it threw one final twist my way. It began with an email from Rachel. I hadn't heard from her since the divorce, and seeing her name in my inbox stirred a mix of emotions, none of them pleasant. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" Curiosity got the better of me. Her message was short, almost desperate. "Alex, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need your help. Things have been difficult. Please, can we meet? Just once. I promise this isn't about the past. I just need someone to talk to." I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her wallow in the mess she had created. But another part of me, perhaps the part that wanted finality, felt compelled to see her. After all, there was no harm in hearing her out, or so I thought. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe on the edge of town. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. Rachel, who once radiated confidence and charm, now looked hollow. Her clothes hung loosely on her frame. Her hair was dull and her eyes were lined with exhaustion. "Thanks for coming," she said softly, sitting across from me. "What do you want, Rachel?" My voice was firm, detached. She hesitated, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "I messed up, Alex. I see that now. I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my savings. And Ethan?" She trailed off, her voice breaking. "What about him?" I asked, though I already knew where this was going. "He's gone," she admitted. "Ran off when things got bad. Left me to deal with the fallout. I'm broke, Alex. I can't even afford my rent." It was a familiar pattern. Ethan taking what he could and vanishing when it no longer served him. Rachel had always believed she could control him, but it was clear now that she had been nothing more than another pawn in his schemes. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, my tone flat. "But what does this have to do with me?" She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "I don't have anyone else. My friends. They've all distanced themselves. I just need a little help to get back on my feet. Maybe a loan, or no." The word left my mouth before she could finish. Her face fell. "Alex, please, I know I don't deserve it, but you're right," I interrupted. "You don't. You made your choices, Rachel. You betrayed me, lied to me, and tried to take what wasn't yours. Now, you're living the consequences." She looked as though I had slapped her. "I was wrong, okay? I see that now. But you're not perfect either. You didn't fight for us, Alex. You just walked away." I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "Because there was nothing worth fighting for. You threw it all away when you decided a pause meant a free pass to betray me." I moved on, Rachel. You should too. She sat there for a moment, stunned into silence. Finally, she nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I guess I had that coming," she murmured. "Yes, you did. You did." I stood tossing a few bills on the table to cover my coffee. As I walked out, I felt no guilt, no lingering sadness, just relief. Rachel's chapter in my life was finally, truly closed. What happened to Rachel after that, I couldn't say. Maybe she rebuilt her life. Maybe she didn't. But it wasn't my concern anymore. As for Ethan, his downfall was ongoing. The lawsuits had snowballed, and rumors swirled that he had fled the country to avoid creditors. Every so often, I'd hear snippets about his disgrace, and it served as a reminder. Karma has a way of catching up, even to the most slippery of people. Life moved on. Clara and I built something real, something based on trust and respect. And every time I looked at her, I was reminded of the strength it took to walk away from Rachel's betrayal. Revenge had its place, but the greatest victory was reclaiming my life and living it better than ever. Thank you, friends.